Hello, and welcome to our second episode of our student recruitment podcast with our Stewart McKelvey Associates. I'm your host, Janet Zed, the manager of student programs at Stewart McKelvey, and I work with the summer students and article clerks on their journey to becoming great lawyers. This podcast series aims to reach law students who are turning their minds to securing summer student positions and articles, all the while navigating through the challenges of law school. Last episode, we focused on recruitment, how it all works, the process, and dealing with that sense of nerves that we find is really common amongst students going through the process. And today we turn the conversation to the summer student experience. We're joined by two associates today who summered with Stewart McKelvey, and they'll share their experiences, tell some stories, and answer some of those questions that I frequently get asked by students about what it's like being a summer student. So let's start with our guests for today, Maddie Coats and Chee Ng. Maddie Coats is a corporate associate in our Halifax office. She did her undergrad at Mount Allison University and went on to law school at the University of New Brunswick with a semester at the Lund University in Sweden. Maddie was a summer student and an article clerk in our Halifax office and was called to the bar in 2020. Maddie has an athletic background in beach volleyball or just volleyball? Or both? Both. Hockey, sailing, and I think she's been brave enough to admit that she is a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Big time.
Chee was born in Hong Kong, grew up in Ontario, went to law school in New Brunswick, was a summer student in Halifax, and is now an associate in PEI. Called to the bar this summer as an associate in our Charlottetown office, and we couldn't be happier for him. He did his undergrad at the University of Western Ontario with a Bachelor in Medical Sciences. He then became a member of the Canadian Armed Forces before starting law school at UNB. Quite the path. I'd like to list the many awards, prizes, and scholarships this man has received in law school, but we simply don't have the time. So welcome, Chee and Maddie. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started and chat about your summer student experience. I'm going to start with you, Maddie. So if you can, remember back to your very first day of being a summer student. What training did you receive before you had to start digging into any assignments? Or did you just have to hit the ground running?
So we did have, if I remember correctly, it was ages ago. We did have about a week of training. So it was, I want to say our first 4 or 5 days were spent as a group in the main boardroom in our office and just learning everything from how to send things to the printer to opening our document management software. I think the biggest learning curve for me during training was learning about timekeeping. I had no idea that lawyers track their time the way we do. And, tracking every minute of your day was not something as a very typically disorganized person. I remember thinking to myself that there was no way I was going to figure out how to learn how to do that. But no, it definitely helped get us settled, help us feel oriented. We all got to bond with our new cohort. Obviously, coming from UNB, I was one of 2 in my year, and then the rest had been all together at DAL. So the training altogether helped, get us situated as a group and also help us start, on the right foot when we did get to start taking on assignments and get thrown into the mix.
Yeah, and that first week of orientation, I think there's a lot of training that we do provide. But as you mentioned, there's also a team building aspect involved. By the end of those 4 or 5 days, I think you become a much more cohesive group, which is nice before you start digging into assignments. Chee, did you have a similar experience?
So I actually started a week later than everybody else. So Janet was very accommodating and organizing training for me that was separate from the group. So it was a lot of training, like Maddie said. A lot of it was some of it was administrative, like Maddie was talking about, but some of it was also substantive, which I really appreciated. Things like, how to write a research memo, because that's something we're not really taught in law school. At least I wasn't. at least not explicitly. So that was very helpful for getting started into assignments because, well, we started work basically a week right after the training. So that was a very good segue into work.
Yeah, and I commonly hear people say, you go through 3 or so years of law school and you come out and you feel like you can't do anything in a law firm. So the training is, it's sort of the very, beginning of a long journey of learning during your summer. And then again, as an articled clerk. So part of my role as a member of the Professional Resources and Development team is to ensure that our summer students and our article clerks receive a really robust training program. And it's not just that first week, it's ongoing through your summer. And then as an article clerk, we host lunch and learns, which are opportunities to continue that learning through your articling year. And the training is provided by some of our associates and partners. And then that continues throughout your entire time as an associate and your path to partnership. So the learning certainly continues on. We also have a dedicated knowledge services team, which manages our libraries and the countless research resources that are available. And they can be incredible trainers and providers of support when it does come to your learning. And then we also have some dedicated tech trainers on site who keep us up to float with all the ongoing new software and advances in technology. And again, that certainly doesn't stop with your summer student experience. So the training, I think you guys can both agree with me, it's never ending at Stewart McKelvey. There's constant growth and training throughout the entire experience. So I'm guessing you guys made a few mistakes, particularly as summer students. How steep was that learning curve, Chee?
So I also went to UNB like Maddie, and I did summer and article in Halifax. So that was more of a steep learning curve, to be frank, because UNB was a more New Brunswick central centered kind of teaching. Mm-hmm. And so some of the law, it's not very different, but there are some differences in the law between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. One big example, as Maddie knows, is the Companies Act in Nova Scotia. And if students do want to be on the business side of things, that is one consideration that they should think about, that Halifax is a very good corporate practice group, and that if you are coming from a different jurisdiction, there are the learning curve may be steeper because of that one piece of legislation. But in terms of mistakes that I made, going back to research memos, one of the first things that I did, I do remember writing a research memo, and I cited a bunch of cases and wrote the memo. And then when I flipped it to the lawyer asked me, "Did you note up all the cases?" And I didn't at that time. And luckily enough, none of the cases I cited were overturned or anything like that. And so it was fine. But that was a big lesson to cover my bases, cross the T's, dot the I's, double check everything that you do. And that was a very good and very nice way of telling me to, finish everything, do your work.
That's great. And you received that feedback okay?
It was great. The feedback was very constructive. I never felt like I was being yelled at or looked down on or anything like that.
And I think there's an expectation amongst the work providers that mistakes are definitely going to be made. It's inevitable in your summering experience and as a clerk as well. So Maddie, you're perfect. I assume you've never made any mistakes?
No, not one. I feel like I've made countless at this point in terms of substantive drafting, admin errors even. And it's all sort of part of learning. And thankfully, everybody that I've ever worked with has been incredibly patient. I think the one mistake that I made that is, a bit funnier maybe, I was having IT issues when I was a summer student. And we have a man in IT named Gerald, who is fantastic, who I was trying to link to say, "Hi, Gerald, it's my third week as a summer student and my laptop's I'm having all these laptop difficulties, blah, blah, blah. And then I followed up with a phone call and I couldn't get him. And then I learned that Gerald's last name is Wardman. And I had link messaged, emailed, and called Gerald McMacken, who is a partner in our St. John office.
Oh my! He didn't have any tech solutions for you?
Who is, a very senior partner, and got a phone call back from his assistant saying, I really don't think Gerald is going to be able to help you.
Oh, well, it's good to know that someone got back to you.
Someone to get back to me, and then once I figured out it was Gerald Wardman in our Halifax IT department, he came right up. Anyway, and I realized that is not a substantive error necessarily. I've made countless ones of those, but in terms of mistakes, as you find your footing as a summer student, I always sort of think back to just how very little I knew about the firm at the time.
That's one of those moments when your heart stops. You hit send and you realize,
oh my goodness, what have I done?
So I think that the point here in this conversation is just, I think everybody goes into something new, especially a summer student experience, when we feel underprepared sometimes, that mistakes are part of the process and they're expected. And that's the only way that we can grow. So thank you guys for sharing your mistakes, your one mistake that you've made over the last several years. So imagine this. I'll start with you, Maddie. You're trucking along in your first few weeks as a summer student, starting to take on assignments and getting your work done. How did you know if you were doing okay or not? What kind of feedback were you getting, and how did you get that feedback?
Sure. It's a good question, to be honest, because especially as summer students and even still as a junior associate, I feel always there's this sort of looming, am I doing this right? I still feel like I'm trying to figure it out. But as a summer student, I remember the partners that I was working for would take a ton of time to review work with me, which I always found really challenging, but also really good in terms of receiving and understanding the feedback. We do have an internal feedback system, which is really helpful. It's called Feedback Matters. It's basically an automated system where you can request feedback through our, internal server, and partners and associates for whom you're working can fill it out and provide a few details about what they thought of your work. I found something that was really helpful was if I got feedback in person and I didn't want to forget it, I would type it into the feedback and just say, this is the feedback I've received. Can you please confirm? Or not even, can you please confirm, but is this accurate, I suppose? And that sort of helped as I progressed. It would give me something tangible that I could go back and look at and say, okay, I am actually learning how to do these things. When you feel completely overwhelmed by, something completely new on your desk, and you can look back and say, okay, I actually did figure out how to do this one. I can figure out how to do this next thing. But I think the feedback portion is so critical to how we learn and develop that it's really valuable to have both a really open and frank conversation with your work providers, but also have that sort of physical or, digital thing that you can go back and refer to and remind yourself that it's not all bad.
And I assume, Maddie, that there is a balance of you receiving feedback through the Feedback Matters software, but also the informal day-to-day feedback as well.
For sure.
And Chee, what about you? Did you receive any feedback as a summer student where you felt a little bit out of your comfort zone, and how did you react to that feedback?
Well, Maddie was talking about the Feedback Matters and the internal server, and that's digital, obviously. So there is less of a personal aspect to that, and so the feedback I received through that was it was constructive and good, and it helped me develop as a lawyer. But it was very different than receiving feedback in person. And like Maddie said, partners are very very generous in sitting down and reviewing work that you do for them as a summer student, especially because it is the first time a lot of times it is the first time you're doing something at all. And so I guess it was weird for me to have somebody sitting down right beside me and then going through things that I did line by line and being like, with the red pen and being like, okay, this was good, but you could have done this better. So that was a little weird for me sitting there and just being like, okay, yeah. And there are times when, you you should speak up and be like, hey, I did this because of X, Y, and Z, and so this is what I thought. And some partners, most people would appreciate that, to explain your why you did something, and you can take it as a teaching moment. It's like, okay, and they can explain maybe why you were going down the wrong path, or maybe why maybe you missed something that you didn't know about or think about, because honestly, there's a lot that we don't know even, and you're always learning as a lawyer or a student. And so it's having somebody senior right there and telling you, hey, maybe you missed this, or hey, maybe you missed that, and that's why this is not the right way to do something, that's very valuable. And I found that was a very cool part of the summer student experience.
That's great. I mean, when you're in school, you get all those red marks all over your papers, but you don't have to sit next to the professor when he's doing it or when she's doing it. So it's sort of, you're right, it's a new experience to go through that editing of your work with someone right next to you. But I imagine you become more and more used to that. So last episode, we chatted with Cal and Lindsay about recruitment, and one of the myths that was floating around about big firm culture was that it's all work and no play. So what can you guys do to perhaps debunk that myth of some a firm like Stewart McKelvey being all work and no play? Chee, why don't you tell us about some experiences you had as a summer student?
Well, a big part of my summer student experience was getting to know the cohort with me. And so like Maddie, I came in from UNB, and instead of being two UNB students in a group of Dal students, I was the only UNB student in a group of Dal students. And so I was a bit of an outsider in that sense, especially with, as I spoke to earlier, I came in a week late as well. So I missed a lot of the initial team bonding. There were so many social events and so many things that we all went to as a group. So it's not all work and no play. Definitely not.
I think the lawyers and the associates do get really excited when the summer students show up, and they breathe new life into things. And frankly, there's a bit of an excuse to party and socialize once the students show up. So not only are you guys given the opportunity to hang out and do things, like I think your group went kayaking one summer and trampolining, I think. The social opportunities are great too, to meet the lawyers and meet your work providers outside of the work context, and kind of get to know them a little bit more socially. I think it's part of our firm culture for sure in the summer to embrace those students for a social reason as well. Maddie, what about you?
I would echo all of Chee's thoughts there. It was super fun, to be honest, being a summer student, especially at the time. It was 3 of us to an office, so it felt very social. It was, a shared experience. Our group became super close. I would say, rather than, all work, no play, it's more so everybody does work hard, but it's a bit of a work hard, play hard. You go socialize. We did axe throwing when I was a summer student. There was tons of team building opportunities. Once you get farther along, boot camp for the articled clerks training is really fun. And, we have the benefit of being a really big firm, which means there will always be a lot of people around. So it's really social, and you meet your sort of work crew pretty early on. And having so many summer students in at once means you get sort of a built-in gang.
Yeah, it's so an automatic network.
Really nice. Yeah, exactly. And then you do get, you show up, and on day one, you're the new summer students, and people are excited to meet you. They want to show you around. They want to, everybody wants to get to know each other. It's very fun.
Great. I feel like both of your years, are all still really close. There's something to be said about, going through a summer together and then going through articles together that can really bond a group of people, I think, for a lifetime. So it is a really meaningful friendship that is this connected and starts in your summer student experience. So I have time for one more quick question, and you have to answer this in just one sentence. So if you had advice, just one sentence of advice to give to current law students, what would that be? Chee?
Be yourself. Basically, just be yourself. Don't try to fake it.
Great. Maddie?
That was mine, Chee.
I stole it. I'm sorry.
Mine, I would say keep an open mind in terms of, working, thinking about where you want to work, thinking about what you want out of work. That's a very long sentence, but keep an open mind would be the one-liner. Lots of commas.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you joining me today. I love hearing about summer student experiences because I work with the summer students every year, and it's good to know that even if your memories are a bit vague at this point in time, that there's good memories there. And I look forward to our next session. The next episode on this podcast focuses on the articling year and what that looks like, and how our current article clerks are making it through the year of a clerk. So thank you very much, Chee and Maddie. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks,
Thank
Janet.
you, Janet.